Hey there, fellow Arcane enthusiasts. You know, we always talk about the fathers in Arcane. Well, get ready to have your mind blown because today we're diving into the mothers
Oh, yeah.
in this world.
What's really fascinating about this deep dive is that Arcane gives us epic battles and incredible animation, but it's the characters that really stick with you.
Yeah.
And believe me, mothers play a crucial role in shaping who these characters become.
You know, it's interesting how Arcane sets up this world where the traditional family structure is almost non-existent.
Yeah,
We see that with Vish and Jinx, who are grappling with the absence of their biological mothers.
exactly. And that absence becomes a defining force in their lives.
Hmm.
Think about Jinx, for instance.
Okay.
Her need for validation, her almost desperate desire for approval,
Yeah.
especially from Silco, it could stem from that early lack of a consistent, loving mother figure.
That actually makes me think about Jinx's art. It's so vibrant, so raw, and full of emotion. Could that be another way she's seeking validation? A way to express herself and connect with the world?
Absolutely. It's like she's trying to fill that void with color and chaos
Hmm?
to make her mark on a world that's often ignored her. And Silco, being the master manipulator that he is, recognizes and exploits that vulnerability.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Sure.
It's heartbreaking to see how that manipulation twists her artistic talents into something destructive. But shifting gears a bit, what about V?
Okay.
She experienced the same loss as Jinx, but she seems to channel her pain differently.
That's where things get really interesting. From a psychological perspective, we could look at attachment theory to explain their different responses.
Okay.
While Jinx seems to exhibit an anxious attachment style, clinging to anyone who offers even a sliver of affection, V's response is more avoidant. She pushes people away, building walls to protect herself from further hurt.
That makes so much sense.
Mm.
V's tough exterior, her need to be in control, it all stems from that fear of vulnerability.
Mm.
But it also fuels her incredible strength and her unwavering loyalty to those she lets in,
Yeah,
like Caitlyn.
precisely. And that loyalty, that protectiveness, could be seen as a way of compensating for the motherly love she never received. She becomes the protector, the caregiver, almost taking on a maternal role for Powder, even though she's just a child herself.
Speaking of maternal figures, I'm curious about your take on Ambessa Medarda, Mel's mother. She's one of the few examples we see of a traditional mother figure in Arcane, but she's far from the warm and fuzzy type.
And Bessa is a fascinating case study. She's this powerful matriarch, a force to be reckoned with. And it's clear she's shaped Mel's ambition and resilience. But the question is, at what cost?
Right.
Her ruthlessness, her unwavering focus on power creates a palpable distance between her and Mel.
It's almost like she sees love and affection as weaknesses,
Yeah.
something that could hinder her political aspirations. And that creates this interesting tension in their relationship.
Hmm.
You can see Mel yearning for her mother's approval, but also struggling to reconcile her own values with Ambessa's cutthroat approach.
That conflict, that internal struggle is what makes Mel such a compelling character. She's caught between her mother's legacy and her own desire to forge a different path, one that hopefully doesn't require sacrificing her humanity for power.
It makes you wonder if Mel's journey is ultimately about breaking free from that toxic model of motherhood,
Right.
about redefining what it means to be strong and ambitious without losing sight of compassion and empathy.
That's a really insightful observation, because in a way, Mel's story is a counterpoint to Jinx's. While Jinx craves the nurturing and stability she was denied, Mel is grappling with the burden of a mother's legacy that feels both empowering and suffocating.
It's like the show is saying that motherhood in all its forms can be both a source of strength and a source of conflict,
Yes.
shaping us in ways we may not even fully understand.
And that brings us to another intriguing maternal figure, Grayson the Enforcer. She may not be a mother in the traditional sense, but her impact on Caitlyn is undeniable.
Oh, absolutely. Grayson is the epitome of a strong, compassionate leader. And her relationship with Caitlyn, though professional, has these subtle maternal undertones. She mentors Caitlyn, encourages her idealism, and nurtures her sense of justice, all while navigating the complexities of law enforcement in a city riddled with inequality.
What's particularly poignant about their relationship is that it unfolds against the backdrop of Piltover's privilege and Zahn's struggle. Grayson, as an enforcer, represents the establishment,
Yeah.
while Caitlyn, despite her upbringing, seems to have this innate sense of fairness that transcends those societal boundaries.
It's like Grayson sees that potential in Caitlyn, that desire to bridge the gap between Piltover and Zahn to fight for a more just world. And she becomes this guiding light, this symbol of hope, not just for Caitlyn, but for the viewers as well.
And tragically, it's Grayson's death that becomes a catalyst for Caitlyn's growth. It forces her to confront the harsh realities of the world, to
Hmm.
step out of her comfort zone, and ultimately to become that bridge between Piltover and Zahn, carrying on Grayson's legacy in her own way.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound lessons come from loss,
Oof.
from the realization that even the strongest figures are not invincible. And it sets the stage for Caitlyn's journey, which is in many ways about reconciling her privilege with her desire for justice, a journey that Grayson's guidance helped to shape.
And it's worth noting that this theme of loss, of navigating the world without a mother's guidance, is something that connects Caitlyn to both V and Jinx,
Mhm.
albeit in different ways.
Mhm.
It's like the show is drawing these subtle parallels between their journeys,
Mhm.
highlighting the universal experience of seeking connection and meaning in a world that can often feel cold and unforgiving.
It's fascinating how Arcane weaves these complex relationships together.
Yeah.
We've been talking about mothers and mother figures, but I think it's important to circle back to the impact of their absence. It's such a powerful force in the show, especially for Jinx.
What's striking about Jinx is that her story isn't just about the loss of her biological mother, but also the loss of Vander, who served as a surrogate father figure. He tried to provide stability to instill a sense of morality, but his death, coupled with Powder's inherent vulnerabilities, left her incredibly susceptible to Silco's manipulation.
And that manipulation is so insidious because it preys on Jinx's deepest needs. The need for love, for belonging, for someone to see her true potential. But Silco twists those needs, warping them to serve his own agenda.
Precisely. He understands the power of that unfulfilled yearning for a mother's love, and he exploits it masterfully. He positions himself as the only one who truly understands her, the only one who can protect her. But in reality, he's grooming her to become a weapon, a tool for his own ambition.
It's heartbreaking to watch because you see glimpses of the brilliant, creative young girl she could have been if she had had that consistent loving guidance. Instead, her pain and trauma are channeled into this destructive force, a whirlwind of chaos and violence that ultimately consumes everything in its path.
But amidst that chaos, there are also moments of vulnerability, of childlike longing that break through. Think about the scene where Jinx is playing with the dollhouse, recreating the memory of her family. It's a poignant reminder that beneath the anger and the madness, there's still that wounded child who desperately wants to be loved and accepted for who she is.
That scene always gets to me. It's like a window into her soul, a glimpse of the pain she's carrying, the love she's lost, and the desperate search for something to fill that void. And it makes you wonder, if someone had stepped in, offered her that unconditional love and support, could her path have been different?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But Arcane doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, it presents us with these complex characters making difficult choices in a world that often feels rigged against them. And it challenges us to consider the ripple effects of those choices, the ways in which trauma can be perpetuated, and the possibility, however slim, of redemption.
And while Jinx's story is undeniably tragic, it also highlights the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of such profound loss, she finds ways to cope, to express herself, to fight for survival, even if those methods are ultimately self-destructive.
That's a crucial point. Jinx's story is a cautionary tale, but it's also a testament to the power of the human will, the innate desire to connect, to create, to find meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. And it forces us to ask ourselves, what can we do to create a world where children like Jinx are given the love and support they need to thrive, to channel their talents into something positive, something life-affirming?
Those are heavy questions, but they're also incredibly important. And it's to Arcane's credit that it doesn't shy away from those complexities. It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about our own world, about the systems that fail our most vulnerable citizens, about the responsibility we all share in creating more just and compassionate society.
And speaking of responsibility, I think it's worth examining Vi's role in Jinx's life. She tries so hard to be both sister and mother figure, to protect Powder, to guide her, but her efforts are ultimately thwarted by the circumstances, by the violence that surrounds them, and by their forced separation.
It's a classic example of good intentions not being enough. V wants to be that anchor for Powder, but the world they live in keeps pulling them apart. And I think there's a real tragedy in that, in the realization that sometimes even the fiercest love can't overcome the forces of fate.
And it raises a thought-provoking question. Is V's approach truly helpful, or does it enable Jinx's destructive tendencies? By constantly rescuing her, is she inadvertently preventing Jinx from facing the consequences of her actions, from taking responsibility for her own choices?
That's an interesting point. It's like that fine line between protecting someone and enabling them.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially when it comes to family dynamics. We want to help those we love, but sometimes the best way to help is to let them fall, to let them learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. And in Jinx's case, those mistakes have devastating consequences. But it's also important to remember that she's a product of her environment, of a system that has failed her repeatedly. She's a victim of circumstance, of trauma, of manipulation. And while that doesn't excuse her actions, it does offer a more nuanced understanding of her motivations.
And it highlights the importance of addressing those systemic issues, of creating a world where children like Jinx are given the resources and support they need to heal, to grow, to become productive members of society. Because ultimately, it's not just about individual responsibility, it's about collective responsibility. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that the choices we make, the systems we support, have a ripple effect that can impact generations to come.
Well said. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of motherhood in Arcane, the role of community as a surrogate mother figure. Think about Echo's firelights. They offer protection guidance, a sense of purpose, especially for those who have been abandoned or ostracized by traditional families.
It's like they're creating a space where those who have been marginalized can find acceptance, belonging, and even love. They're proving that family isn't just about blood ties. It's about the bonds we choose, the people who choose to see us, to support us, to nurture our potential.
And those bonds can be incredibly powerful, even transformative. They can offer a sense of hope in a world that often feels hopeless, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, human connection can still flourish.
It's a beautiful message, really. And it makes me think about how often we underestimate the power of community, of those informal networks of support that exist outside of traditional institutions. It's in those spaces, those communities of shared experience that we often find the strength to overcome adversity, to heal, to grow, and to create a better world for ourselves and for future generations. Arcane really packs a punch with its storytelling. We've spent this deep dive exploring motherhood, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
That's the beauty of Arcane. It doesn't shy away from complexity, throws us right into this world riddled with conflict and inequality, and introduces us to these flawed characters, then asks us to grapple with the messy realities.
Right, and when you look at motherhood specifically, Arcane throws the traditional rule book right out the window. We see biological mothers, absent mothers, surrogate mothers, and even the community itself stepping in to fill those gaps.
It's like Arcane is asking, who says family has to look a certain way? Who gets to define what it means to nurture and care for another human being?
Exactly. We see this with Grayson, who, despite not being Caitlin's mother, has this undeniable impact on her development. And even the community of Zaun, with all its flaws, becomes this safety net for those who have been abandoned or ostracized by traditional family structures.
These unconventional relationships challenge us to reconsider what truly matters. The blood ties or the quality of the connection, the support and the guidance that's offered. It's a powerful message about the potential for human connection to transcend those conventional boundaries.
And it makes me think about how society often puts mothers in a box, expecting them to fit this narrow definition of what it means to be maternal. But Arcane shows us that motherhood can manifest in so many different ways. It can be fierce and protective, like V's, ambitious and calculating, like Ambessa, or even quiet and steadfast, like Grayson.
And sometimes it's about recognizing that we don't need to do it alone. That leaning on our community, on those chosen families, can be just as powerful, if not more so, than relying solely on traditional structures. Think about how the Firelights rally around Echo, providing him with a sense of belonging and purpose that he wouldn't have found elsewhere.
It's like they're proving that sometimes the strongest families are the ones we build ourselves through shared experiences, mutual respect, and unwavering support.
And that's a message that I think resonates deeply with viewers, regardless of their personal backgrounds or experiences. Because at its core, Arcane is a story about the human search for connection, for meaning, for something bigger than ourselves. And in a world that often feels divided and fractured, that message of hope, of finding solace in those unexpected connections is incredibly powerful.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into motherhood and Arcane, what's the one takeaway you hope listeners will carry with them?
I hope they'll leave with a broader perspective on what motherhood can look like, on the myriad ways in which we can nurture and support one another, and on the enduring power of human connection, even in the face of adversity.
Beautifully said. And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. We encourage you to rewatch Arcane, to pay attention to those subtle nuances in the relationships, and to share your own insights with us. What resonated with you? What surprised you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that ignite your imagination.